welcome back. Time for leadership, time for growth. So now we're going to have an inspirational keynote from David Ståhlberg, an expert in digital business development. He's an advisor and change maker to lead teams that have transformative agendas. And after leading roles at Google Sweden and Procter & Gamble, David is today helping leaders to lead teams to turn the accelerating pace of technological change into an opportunity for positive impact and personal growth. He asked the question, how do you create innovation that makes meaningful difference? And today David will share his perspectives and insights on the latest trends. David Ståhlberg, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
My pleasure.
I know that you worked at Google, and everybody thinks of Google as one of the great innovation engines of our time. Did you have the bug for innovation before you went to Google, or did you catch it there?
I definitely had it, but it's been growing ever since, I would say.
Ever since.
Just as for everyone, right?
Just as for everybody.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a presentation. We're really looking forward to it, and I'd like to invite the audience to submit questions as we go along, and if we have time, I will present those questions to David at the end. So David, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I wanted to start off with a couple of questions that I'm sure that everyone is asking themselves these days. Questions such as, how come Apple has added another $1,000 billion of market cap only in the last 12 months? How could that possibly be, right? Or how come Uber, that continues to make billion-dollar losses every quarter, they lost another $1.8 billion in Q2 this year. How come they are still valued to $60 billion? And since we are in Stockholm, how come Spotify is valued to a breathtaking $40 billion and barely still makes a profit? So I usually ask this question to lead teams and people that I meet. How come these 6 companies are so extremely highly valued, or 7 companies? How come these are 7 of the 10 most valued companies in the world? And the kind of answers I often get is, they have great leaders, they are customer-centric, they manipulate us with our own data, and perhaps there is a grain of truth in all of that, but I would like to offer you a different explanation. And I think in order to get to that explanation, you have to go back 100, 150 years in time and look at some of the most wealthy people of all time. People such as John D. Rockefeller, who made his fortune on oil, people like Andrew Carnegie, who made his fortune on steel, and people like Cornelius Vanderbilt, who made his fortune first on the shipping industry and then invested into railroads and become much, much richer. So after the Industrial Revolution, you had resources such as coal, steel, oil, railroads, the shipping industry, and these were resources that the whole economy has relied upon ever since. This was the infrastructure that the Industrial Revolution and the industrial economy relied upon. And in a very similar fashion, you now have a bunch of infrastructures, a bunch of resources that is underpinning the digital economy, such as artificial intelligence, 5G networks, processing capability, and so forth. Quantum computers will come. And if one of you quit your job tonight, the likelihood is 9 out of 10 that you will put that company on servers that belong to either Microsoft, Amazon, or Google. So these companies are providing resources that all of us have to use to live our lives or to thrive as businesses. So you might want to ask yourself, who are the railway makers of our time? And it's definitely some of these companies, but you can also ask yourself a different question. What countries are leading the pack here? And it's obviously China and Asia who is really good at this. They are filing most patents in the world, or those offices are receiving most patents in the world right now. And the competition is not even close. But you might want to ask yourself a different question, which is, who are the railway makers in your industry? And there's not always a black or white answer to that question, but it's always an interesting question to ask yourself. So just to give you a couple of examples. If you take the news industry, for example, I think it's worthwhile to pay for quality journalism, right? But it's actually not the first question we ask ourselves. It's not like the first thing we do when we hit the paywall on a news site. It's not to bring up our credit card and pay for that article. The first thing we ask ourselves is probably, can I find that same piece of content for free somewhere else? And Google is providing the infrastructure for us to do that. They are laying the infrastructure in the information business. If you take music, for example, I guess some of you are using Spotify. And for those who are, I would like to give you the following kind of thought experiment. Who would you miss the most if a record label, a random record label, went bankrupt tonight and they disappeared from the face of the earth? Or Spotify went bankrupt, you couldn't use their app anymore, and they disappeared from the face of the earth? I'm sure many Spotify users would say, I would miss Spotify more if they disappeared than a random record label. it's a bit sad, but my personal take on this is that even if Spotify lost the rights to have two of my favorite artists on their platform, they would probably just mean that I listen less to those artists, those bands, but I would still use Spotify as much as I do today. And if you have that position in an industry, you're kind of owning the customer, you are becoming the player in that industry that every other player needs to interact with and rely upon. And then you are the railway maker in that industry. And those railway makers are popping up in business after business, in industry after industry. In business to business, 84% of you tell us that you think digitalization and increasing expectations on digitalization from your customers and partners is the biggest threat to your business. So you might want to ask yourself the question, what is actually digitalization? And that is a huge topic. I met a CIO not too long ago, and she said it really well. She said, we have the word digitalization 14 times in our highest strategy document for the company, 14 times on the same one-pager. But she said to me, hand on heart, between you and I still don't really think we know what it means. And that's a very easy place to end up with, because digitalization means everything and yet, to a certain extent, nothing. So I try to make things simple, and I make that simple by asking all the companies that I work with 2 fundamental questions. 1, for whom do you exist? And 2, how do you make life radically better for them? And if you can answer both those questions, you have a good answer to also what digitalization means for your business. It's not harder than that. So I would like to send you off with 4 pieces of advice. And the first piece of advice I would want to give you today is to not start with tech, but always start with your customer. And I think that Scania is a beautiful example of this. They used to tell us that they were a truck manufacturing company. Our product is trucks. We love trucks. We create trucks. We have a lot of experts on great trucks. But they realized time after, a while back actually, that their customers cared a little bit less about the truck than what they did at Scania. What their customers cared about was to move things efficiently from point A to point B. So they used to equip their trucks with sensors, like some of the other players in this industry have done after them, sensors that gave important information back to Scania, data that Scania could use to help the haulers in different ways. They could help the haulers to route plan, to drive more environmentally friendly, to improve the engines of the trucks. They could have a new business model that they didn't need to sell the whole truck at once. They could charge by ton and kilometer. And they also upped their game from that. They could say that we don't need to have all the trucks being on service at the same time, but we could increase uptime by knowing exact what truck needs what service when. But it didn't even stop there. They're also using drivers coaching. They're using data to help drivers in real time to improve their driving skills and the performance of the truck. So they have realized that the truck is just a part of the product. The product is actually in 2020 so much more than the truck. It includes the service, which you might want to call uptime in this sense, but it also includes the experience, how you bring that all to life with drivers coaching. So that is the product in 2020. We are all tech companies now. Some of us are poor tech companies, some of us are great tech companies, but we are all in the tech industry at this point. So in business to business, only 42% of businesses have actually mapped the customer journey. So I think my first real advice is to really be good at walking in your customer's shoes, understanding their pain points, and addressing what is important to the customer. This is a typical customer map, a customer journey map. You have probably seen those before. And I just want to send you off with one piece of advice, and that is to be really good at spotting what is happening even before the customer gets to know you and what is happening after they have bought and installed and used your product for a while. These are often blind spots to us. We're often very good at understanding the customer's pains as they come into our store, as they meet our salespeople, when they buy the product, when they install it and use it for the first time. But we are often not so good at understanding the early stage of the customer journey and the very late stage. The second piece of advice I would like to give you is to become really good at automation, to automate to serve your customer needs better. So if this clock is representing a typical customer journey today, where the early phase is when you as a customer realize that you have a need for something. You start to research the business or the industry a little bit. You start to understand what the key alternatives are. The middle phase is when you start to understand a little bit more what your needs specifically are and what options are out there. You maybe start to look at different price tags. And the late phase is when you start to get into the real details. You start to meet people at the at your vendor. You start to understand exactly what is it that they offer. When can I get the product? Can I negotiate on the price? You're super close at this point to closing the deal, to closing the purchase. And what we are seeing in industry after industry is that people want to do more of the job themselves. Customers want to rely more on themselves to do the early and the middle phase of the customer journey, and they actually want to have a physical interaction with us as the supplier later in the process. And COVID-19 have just speeded things up. You can't even meet physically as you used to do, so the digital tool is out there as an even stronger component. So this is explaining why you have harder and harder time to get cold calls answered, why it's getting harder and harder to book customer meetings with people, because the customer is now used to do more of the work themselves, and they like it. And what is happening, to put it in different words, is that we are going from something we can call business 1.0, and this is probably early 90s something. And I think it's fair to say that we all need to remember how life looked like back then. If you wanted to know something about shoes, your only option was to go into a shoe store and meet with a salesperson in that shoe store. That was your window to the shoe business. If you wanted to know something about valves, you had to meet a valve salesperson. That was the window to a whole industry, to the world of knowledge that you were looking for. Then, late 90s something, you got the internet going. Some people started to put up some sort of alternative to that. You had a web page, but this door was still not working really well. The information was scrappy, and it wasn't really customer friendly. Now, where most businesses are today is in a multi-channel world. There are many ways for your customers to interact with you. You might have social media, you have customer service, you might have an e-commerce site, you have marketing, and that is all great, but for one issue, and that is that the information is not flowing super well behind the scenes. Information is often getting lost, and you might feel this as consumers or customers yourself. For example, if you call, let's say, a big telephone company, they might ask you while you are waiting for them to pick up your call for your customer ID or your customer number. And sometimes, you pick up an invoice and you find that long customer number with 12 digits, and they tell you that, please punch in your customer number for faster service. And quite often, the first thing they actually ask you when they pick up the phone is, please, can you give us your customer ID? And this actually happened to me not that long ago. I was waiting for 1 hour in line, and then I was providing my customer ID while waiting. And the first thing the guy that picked up the phone was asking me was for my customer ID. And I felt a bit frustrated, so I told him, look, I just want to tell you two things before we get going. One, I've been waiting in line for 1 hour. Two, I've already provided you with my customer number. And he said, okay, thank you. That's great that you tell me, but I can't really see that in my systems. And I thought to myself, obviously, why then do you ask me? But here's the issue. The systems are not really helpful. So information is getting lost from one system to the other. And this is really what omnichannel is all about. Omnichannel is doing two jobs at the same time by integrating information in all of those channels. So information is flowing seamlessly behind all of these touch points with the customer. And by doing that, you can provide two different values. One, you can use information from one touch point to create a better customer experience in the other touch points. And SCANIA is just one great example of this. And the more connected products you have, the more sensors, the more data, the more connected services, the more you know about your customer and the higher value you can provide her. There is also a second piece of value. And I often say this a bit brutally, but I tell companies that I meet, if I gave you 1 million euros, you would not know where to invest that money. And that's not because these companies are bad, but that's because they lack the omnichannel engine. And it's not because of a lack of data per se. You get tons of data from Facebook. You can get tons of data from Google. You can get tons of data from your sales team. But you measure things in different languages. You don't measure them in the same currency. But in an omnichannel world, in an ideal omnichannel world, you can measure everything in the same currency, and you can attribute a specific value of each channel, of each touch point to your business. So omnichannel serves those two purposes. It can increase your customer experience by using information from one touch point to create a better experience in the next. And you can also improve your ROI by knowing exactly what touch point has what value for the business. So I want you to send this second piece of advice off with this one piece of advice, which is to think about who is best suited for a specific job. The machine is superb at storing huge amounts of data and analyzing it in real time. The man, the human, is better at some other things, which is to build close relationships, to take care of you when you're disappointed, to convince you to enter a deeper partnership. But for the first three things here, to qualify leads based on CRM data, to be there 24/7 for your customers, to monitor and analyze product performance, just as in Scania's case, some of these things, the machine are way ahead of us, and they are much more suited for the job. So in a world where the customer wants to interact with us all the time through digital channels, we need to automate the early phases of the customer journey, and then put in our best sales team, our best technician resources when it matters the most. The third piece of advice I wanted to give you is to build an innovative organization. And these days, when we talk about leadership, you often get the kind of sense that what you're supposed to do is to go from some sort of hierarchy, if you ever were there, do it because I tell you to do it, to some sort of anarchy. Now, everyone is going to play ping pong and wear a cool cap and be super creative and do whatever they like. That's not really how I see things. I think there is a different dimension that you can cut the organization in. And that is to make it super clear, where are we all heading? And that's the job of the leadership team to provide. But then, as people check in and buy into that direction, let people do what they are hired to do, which is their job. Let them, based on their personality, based on the interactions that they have with their customers, based on the knowledge that they specifically own, decide how to provide that piece of input to your business that moves your business in that same direction. So I usually talk about the snowball. The job that you as leaders have to do is to pack a tight snowball at the top of the organization. You need to have a common sense of the world, where the world is heading, and a common sense of what direction you have as a company. And often lead teams tell me that they have that clear sense of direction. They have that super packed snowball at the top. But you just scratch a little bit on that surface, and quite often the snowball falls apart. You weren't that aligned. And a small crack at the top of the company, if you're a 2,000 employee company, it becomes a raft lower down in the organization. But some companies are good at that. They take the time, they might go to Silicon Valley, they are engaging in workshops and conferences like we do today, and they pack that snowball, and they have a super clear vision, a clear strategy, and a clear view of where the world is heading. But then there's a second piece of failure that I want you to be aware of, and that is when you roll out the snowball in the organization too quickly. You might summon your 200 middle managers and you step on stage and you tell them about that beautiful vision that you have and that strategy for the future, and you expect them to kind of rise and give you a standing ovation. But that doesn't really happen, because you just gave them 1 hour to accept and make theirs something that you have worked on for 6 to 12 months. And you don't even stop there. Some companies expect them to, after that session, go out and talk about this vision as it was their own idea to their own teams. And this is usually where the snowball falls apart again. So what you have to do is you have to do three things. You have to have a direction that speaks to the heart. It needs to be a direction that you want to go in as an employee, that you feel attracted to. It speaks to the head. You understand it makes business sense for us to move in that direction as a company. And it needs to be super clear. It needs to be so. I actually met a company last week, and they told me, we have a quite clear direction. We have a 12-page strategy plan. And it's 12 pages. No one in your company will ever read those 12 pages. It's not about having a strategy that someone possibly can understand. It's about having direction that you impossibly can misunderstand. Then you have the clarity that you need. And just to give you two examples, before that, though, I just want to say that once you have that clarity, you have that same story to everyone that you interact with, to all your stakeholders. You have the same story about who you are and where you're going, whether you meet your employees, your board, your investors, whether you meet new recruits or you meet your customers or suppliers. You have that one same packed story about who you are and where you're going. And two companies that do this really well, I think one, to take Swedish examples, is Klarna. They are in the financial payments industry, and they use only 2 words to tell us who they are and where they are going. They're talking all the time about smooth payments. That's who they are. That's the value that they provide to the world. If you're doing something that is not about making payments easier and smoother, that is not Klarna. If you're working on something that makes payments smoother, that's in the Klarna camp. Everyone knows what they are up to. And the other example, again, is Scania. They're telling us today that their mission is to make their customers winners in a sustainable transport system. And if you listen to their CEO, Henrik Henriksson, this is all over the place all the time. He's always talking about this. And everything that they do line up to this one vision and strategy. So the point here is to have a clear direction, and the leadership job is really to envision and engage and set the framework for how employees should interact and engage in this vision. But then the job of everyone is to own their how, is to, based on their personality, their know-how, and their skills, provide the input and co-shape how the company moves in this direction. So that leads me to the fourth and final piece of advice, and that is the job we as leaders have, which is to inspire people to become more curious and to innovate and be more experimentative in your work. It's to be role models for what I call radical curiosity. And sometimes people misunderstand what I'm talking about, and they say, just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, everything is supposed to be new, it's all new and shiny, it's all digital. That's not the way we know innovation happens, right? We know that innovation happens in the intersect between two competency areas. It's because you know a lot about your industry, about your customers, you have domain expertise. It's because of all of that you can create innovation. But only if you have the courage to stand on your own shoulders and say, I don't know everything. Everything I do can be done in a better way. The question is only when it happens, who does it. And some of the things that I deeply believe to be true can actually be wrong. And with that courage, you throw yourself into something new ways of working, new partnerships, new technologies. And in that intersect between what you already know and the things that you can learn, innovation happens. So I would like you to this is a question that I fell in love with a year back. I was served this question in a podcast I was listening to, and they phrased it a bit differently. They said, are you a little bit too proud of the things that you know? Are you a little bit too proud of the things that you think you know? And that really stuck with me. I was out walking. I almost stopped in my tracks, and I just felt kind of embarrassed about the question. Because I think I'm a little bit too proud of the things that I think I know. And I don't think that's a good place to be in a world that moves fast. The time is gone when one person at the top could have all the answers. And there is something almost unhealthy in society today. If you say something once and then 3 years later you say something different that contradicts the first thing, you've been bad. You might get fired if you're a politician. And I don't think that's healthy. The best thing often people like to do is to say, I always said that. I always said that. That's beautiful to people. But from the bottom of my heart, I can't think of anything more unhealthy for the society, for your organizations, or for us as individuals than us holding on to the exact same beliefs that we had when we were 17. There's nothing positive with that. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, he has made taken this to heart, and he has this method when he's making entries. He's not only asking for your competency and tell me that you are the best in the world at what you do. He's also asking for when did someone prove you wrong the last time? When did someone make you change your mind about something important? He's looking for that intellectual humility. So next time you are in an argument, it can be in your private life or it can be professionally in your organization, think about this. What argument are you trying to listen to? What argument do you want to hear? Do you want to hear the worst counter-argument to what you believe, or do you want to hear the best counter-argument to what you believe? I can tell you really want to listen to the best counter-argument to your own beliefs. It's only the best counter-argument that makes you smarter, that makes your worldview richer, and that eventually can make you change your mind to something that is a little bit more closer to the truth. With that, I want to start round off and give you kind of 5 leadership challenges. The first one is to understand the digital economy better. Are you the railroad makers in your industry? If not, are you integrating well with them? Are you providing unique value in the ecosystem that they are building? 2, direction. What do you want your customers to say about your business in 2025? Usually when I talk about vision and direction, I don't think about something 50 years ahead. You can have that, that's fine, but it can become too lofty. And it's not about your plan for 2021. That's often too dull, right? But think about what you want your customers to say in 5 to 10 years from now, and I think you get to the right level. Number 3, customer journeys. Have you optimized your channel strategy based on what customers want, based on their pain points? When do they want to interact with you physically? When do they want to interact with you digitally? And how can you make sure that the omnichannel engine moves information seamlessly between those different touch points? 4, does all your employees have a common sense of direction and clear mandates? That's an important one for you to release the innovation power in your company. And finally, to do that, you also need to be role models for curiosity. It doesn't matter if you have employees and you are a manager or not. We're all leaders in our businesses, and we are all leaders for our own lives. So we need to take this to heart, to be wrong more often, because being wrong often actually just means that you learn a lot. With that, I wanted to round off and thank you for listening and invite Malcolm back on stage.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your fantastic presentation. Enjoyed it very much. And being that I started my working life 37 odd years ago in business 1.0, I can really recognize these changes very, very clearly in my own working life.
Right.
I remember my first day at work as a young salesman, pretty much fresh out of school. It was a 2 yellow pages phone books and a telephone. That was the technology that was on my desk when I started working, and of course now I'm sitting here with an iPad chatting with everyone across the planet at the same time. We actually had a question come in from the audience, and I would like to invite the audience to bring questions to us. If you have any questions or comments about the presentation, please send them to us. But we had a question from Jan, who said, is there a difference in the leadership message from small, medium, and large companies?
I think the principles that we just talked about are very much the same. I would though say that there's different dynamics. If you are a small startup, some of these things that I talked about often comes more naturally. You have a founder who's been probably a visionary person, and she's often able to give that clear direction and that purpose, the sense of purpose to everyone for the first maybe 5 to 10 years, right? And whenever she's recruiting, she's getting that acceptance on the vision in the recruiting moment, right? Because you are only letting people into the company that are signing up for that vision. So you have that acceptance much more easily. In a mature business, and you've been around for 20, maybe 50, maybe 100 years, some of that is definitely gone. And you have a much tougher job to get that going again. It's definitely possible. I work with companies, I've seen companies that have been able to do that, but it requires more. It requires that you still need to be the manager, that solves all the everyday issues and, that catch fires and or makes things happen and solves problems. But you also have to be that visionary person that stands on stage and tells everyone where they are going, and make sure that people accept, understand, and get the time to buy into, and eventually make that direction theirs. So it's a tougher job, you might want to say.
Yeah. So it's that snowball that you said. If it's a small company, you need one snowball.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you're Ericsson, you have 150,000 employees. That snowball really needs to roll down the hill and get very, very big.
Yeah, and it takes time, and you need a lot of patience. There is something people call the curse of knowledge. And essentially, that's something we all have. As soon as we understand something ourselves, it's almost impossible for us to put ourselves in the shoes of someone who has not yet made that same insight. So as soon as you get something, you just expect that if I tell you this, you will understand it. And that's not how things happen. So you need to be patient and give people a lot of time.
In the last 2 minutes we have, a question I have is on the how. Like you told, people have to own their how.
Right.
And the thing that I see inside organizations that are trying to do this is they want to do it, but they don't know how to measure people's productivity in new ways.
Right.
What do you think the barriers are for managers letting go and letting people do things their way?
Now, I think that's a great question, and that's probably a longer topic. But if I would name two things. One is often the issue is that you don't have that sense of clarity. You haven't provided that framework, like where exactly are you going, and can you explain that to people so that becomes clear? And often that little crack at the leadership team level, that discloses itself by leaders having a hard time to let go, because it's impossible for them to tell people or to engage them in a common direction. There's that crack already at the very top. That's the main one. If you are super clear and you know that people that are on your team buy into that vision and they know what it means, then it's so much easier.
And also, a different kind of KPI. I think it was Zappos who have this fantastic thing with their customer service department. The only thing we're going to measure is customer satisfaction. There's
Zappos
one metric. Is the customer happy? We don't care how many calls you take, etc. There's only that metric to hit.
And I think you underline something that's very important, which is the measurability. So
measurability.
This is using data to make sure that when people experiment and they do new things, you see how those experiments pay out, and you can use that knowledge.
Great. We have a couple of questions we didn't get time to answer that came from the audience. So we'd love you to jump on the platform and answer those questions if you have time. David, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks. Okay, Next, we're going to go to a video presentation on sustainability. CECE have created a video on sustainability, and after that video finishes, we'll have a special guest coming in to speak to us from Brussels. So please roll the sustainability video.
Sustainability is a current hot-button topic and has been for several years, spurring innovation and creating positive change. There are few places where this is more obvious than the construction industry.
What makes the construction industry unique is its heterogeneous character. It is also a sector which has a huge size and importance. Indeed, it employs roughly 20 million people in Europe and develops 10% of the GDP of the European Union. It is also at the center of several of our societal and economic challenges, the sustainability challenge, the digitalization challenge, and also other societal challenges that involve people and the level of employment that it has. And in the challenges of sustainability, it's important to remind ourselves that the built environment in Europe is responsible for 36% of the CO2 emissions.
The Committee for European Construction Equipment, CECE, is a recognized organization representing and promoting the European construction equipment and related industries. It coordinates the views of national associations and their members by influencing the institutions and other organizations worldwide to achieve a fair, competitive environment via harmonized standards and regulations.
The construction equipment industry in Europe is first of all 1,200 companies employing 300,000 people and developing a turnover yearly of 40 billion euros. It is an industry which is significantly different than the transport industry. This is why our machines are machines, they're not vehicles. And it serves an industry which always struggles for productivity gains and for process improvements.
A great example of how sustainability is being advanced through process efficiency can be seen in the development of the Lokotrack urban range of machines by manufacturer Metso.
Aggregates in construction industry are typically produced in a quarry that is in the remote location, and the material then are transported from quarry to a construction site. Sometimes this material is even dug up on the construction site, transported back to the quarry for crushing, and then transported back to be reused, generating unnecessary transportation emissions and costs. The other possibility is to crush on-site to prevent all unnecessary emissions, including those that are related to transportation and the ones that are related directly to the crushing operation. Sustainable crushing means reducing dust and noise emissions that are challenge in the areas where people work and live. We developed Lokotrack urban range of equipment, mobile crushers, that are especially developed for preventing dust and noise emissions.
Martin Rønning AS er totalleverandør av grunn- og terrengarbeider. Tidligere transporterte vi alle masser til godkjent mottak, for så å dra til nærmeste pukkverk og transportere masser tilbake til byggeplass. I dag så knuser vi masser på stedet med Urban 106S, noe som gjør at vi sparer både tid og penger og transportutgifter.
CECE is an important partner for Metso Outotec, helping us to communicate and deliver the sustainability message in industry and within authorities.
Thanks to regulation and innovation, we have been reducing air pollution in cities from construction machines by 95%. We are outlining an holistic approach where construction is at the center of the sustainability challenge and of the Green Deal challenges. Indeed, we have developed what we call the four-pillar approach, which designs four different elements where the machine is at the center of the decarbonization goal. These 4 pillars start with the machinery efficiency, go on with the operation efficiency, follow on with the process efficiency, and last but not least, the choice or the selection of alternative energy sources. These 4 elements do not function when taken single-handedly, when taken alone, because they all contribute to decarbonizing the construction site. The machine is an element of a job site where other elements will contribute to decarbonizing to a net zero emission goal that the EU is setting itself.
One way the construction industry is becoming more sustainable through process efficiency is through the development of digital and smart construction.
Smart construction, it's a family of solutions which have been brought about to help the industry to work safer, more efficient and more productive. And we want to be able to bring companies a more easy to use solution. Our vision is for them to have full understanding of job site process. So from man, machine, material and terrain from anywhere in the world. This visibility allows our customers to develop a safer, a cleaner, more happy environment for all stakeholders involved.
Smart Construction Dashboard gives every team member a good visualization of the job site, even without getting there. They can measure out stockpiles, cut fill volumes online with just a few clicks. MJ Eriksson has working with Smart Construction team to measuring terrain with a Smart Construction Edge and a DJI drone.
The Smart Construction Edge is a tiny computer that acts as a GPS base station to help with the drone's positioning. There's no longer a need to step on an active job site because the Smart Construction Edge does not rely on ground control points that the surveyors have to place manually, getting all the benefits of terrain measurement without the dangers, no matter what equipment is moving the earth. After the drone has been flown, the data is processed on-site by the Smart Construction Edge to give up-to-date terrain data simply and efficiently.
It's not an environment where a single piece of technology can transform the complete process. When creating smart construction, we found it essential that the data captured becomes smart and not stuck in a single software. We think of these 2 challenges as vertical transformation and horizontal transformation. And only by looking at both axes can the job site effectively be transformed. Once elements of vertical transformation are in place and the horizontal transformation, passing data through the construction process begins, data from other vertical transformations can be combined to answer complex questions on the job site, creating a real smart, intelligent and optimized construction process.
Although alternative fuels are only a part of the much bigger puzzle, they are an important element that CECE and its members are pushing where possible and reasonable. The Wacker Neuson Group is a manufacturer of compact construction equipment and a forerunner when it comes to reducing noise and exhaust emissions on inner-city construction sites.
Ja, Wacker Neuson hat bereits vor vielen Jahren begonnen, in dem Bereich Zero Emission zu entwickeln. Und wir bieten heute eine komplette Produktpalette an Zero Emission Produkten an. Mit unserer Produktpalette kann der Kunde bereits heute eine komplette kleine oder mittlere Baustelle völlig emissionsfrei betreiben. Die Einsätze sind sehr, sehr vielfältig, angefangen von sensiblen Bereichen wie Kindergärten, Schulen, die Renovierung von Krankenhäusern während des regulären Betriebes bis hin zu Tunnelbaustellen. Wenn wir ein Produkt in dieser Reihe entwickeln, ist eine Anforderung, dass wir keine Leistungseinbußen gegenüber dem konventionellen Gerät haben. Der größte Vorteil unserer Zero-Emission-Produkte ist, dass wir keine Abgase haben. Das schützt natürlich in erster Linie den Anwender der Maschine, aber auch das Umfeld im Bereich der Baustelle. Aber es sind nicht nur die Abgasemissionen, wir haben auch in etwa gegenüber konventionellen Produkten in etwa 5-mal weniger Lärm.
Ja, unsere jüngsten Projekte mit unseren Zero-Emission-Produkten war einmal eine Nachtbaustelle in Kopenhagen Ende letzten Jahres. Hier war in einer Fußgängerzone neue Kabel zu verlegen. Die Arbeiten mussten nachts bzw. am frühen Morgen durchgeführt werden. Und hier konnten unsere Zero-Emission-Produkte, angefangen vom Stampfer bis zum Bagger und Radlader, voll ihre Stärken ausspielen. Der CECE setzt sich dafür ein, dass unsere Industrie ein faires Wettbewerbsumfeld und einheitliche Standards geschaffen werden.
Unlike other machines and unlike vehicles, electrification is just part of the solution. Indeed, there will always be machines in which the power density of other energy carriers will be needed. This is why we believe there are other solutions next to electrification which could lead on to net zero CO2 emissions. It's important to remember that it's not only about the machinery, it's about the machinery within the job site. This is why application and use determines the opportunity for electricity or hydrogen energy carriers. And this is where our four-pillar approach really should be central to the consideration.
Volvo's view on sustainability is very much connected to our greater purpose, building the world we want to live in. And to be able to contribute to the journey towards our greater purpose, we need to take a holistic view of sustainability. And that means economic, environmental and social dimension of sustainability. It's also very important that we include all parts of the value chain in our sustainability approach. All steps from mineral extraction, sourcing, supply management, our own operations, product development, to the use of our machines. In terms of social sustainability, we have defined three subset areas. The first one is health, safety and well-being, and then we are talking about both product safety, the safety of our machines, but also occupational health and safety, including all parts of our value chain. The second area is about business ethics, that we do business in an ethical and sound way. The third area is societal development. And in the area of societal development, we team up with the global, regional and local key stakeholders and partners to really try to find areas where we can improve the community where we are active, but at the same time also enable an improved business for Volvo Construction Equipment. We believe it's important with a strong industry organization for construction equipment in Europe. One of the reasons behind that is that there are a lot of changes going on in our industry now, with transformative changes like electrification, with autonomous machines and digitalization. Of course, in that phase, there's a need to put standards in place.
The message for us is come together towards sustainable construction. This is exactly the idea behind the Construction 2050 Alliance, which we have founded together with all the other representatives of the construction value chain in Europe. This is the only way we can go towards the Green Deal objectives of decarbonizing Europe by 2050. Indeed, this can only be done if we all join forces and come together as members, as allies, as partners, as regulators.
Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the video. Really exciting to see how CECE is really helping to move towards those Green New Deal objectives. And now a very exciting guest. Very excited to announce that we have Kerstin Jorna joining us from Brussels. She's the Director General for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. She's a German national and civil servant working at the European Commission, where she's held various positions, including head of cabinet for several commissions and serving as Deputy Director General in the Economic and Financial Affairs, General Directorate. That's a mouthful. But additionally, she has held positions on the board of both the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund. It's a great honour to have her with us. Kerstin, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Malcolm, for this. And gentlemen, thank you also very much for this video, which connects very well to what I want to say to you. I want you to ride a wave, and that's the renovation wave, which we will be bringing out next week. Let me explain. The ecosystem that you are, the construction ecosystem, is one of the biggest ecosystems in the European economy. You know, we have 14 ecosystems that irrigate and nurture the European economy, and construction is one of the biggest, with 22 million workers, with 5 million companies, and with 10.15% of EU added value. That's massive. So you're one of the biggest construction ecosystems, but you're also one of the most relevant for the green and digital transition, which was explained in the video before. And let me give you 3 headline numbers why that is so. 30% of all energy consumed in Europe is for heating and cooling. 40% of all CO2 emissions generated in Europe come from existing buildings. And another 30% of all waste is construction waste. Now here's the challenge, and now here is also the opportunity, which is more important. In our renovation wave, we look, as was said before in the video, at the holistic system. We're looking at the renovation wave to power this green and digital transition of your ecosystem. We're looking at materials, low carbon materials. I'm talking about green cement, I'm talking about wood, I'm talking about maybe other new solutions that we will be found. So we need to develop new materials, and obviously also new machines to handle these materials. I'm talking about sensors. We will need to make our future buildings smart to optimize energy consumption and CO2 emission at the same time. That means having the right sensors, but also being able to handle the sensors, being able to collect, monitor and process data from these sensors to make the system work. It also means having the right skills. Already before the crisis, 70% of our companies across the 14 ecosystems said we don't have the right skills for doing this digital, this twin transition. So we proposed a month ago the European Skills Agenda, which looks at every single ecosystem, including the construction ecosystem, and brings together the relevant actors per ecosystem in round tables for skills. And these round tables will help to identify what are the skill needs, so for the employers to say, but also what's the skill set we have today. And if there is a gap, which is mostly the case, then we have to define what to do about it. How do we upskill and reskill? How do we have the programs? How do we make sure that the upskilling and reskilling, it's actually the skills that will be needed in the future? And most importantly, who's going to invest into this? These round tables with the CEOs involving both our commissioners, Commissioner Breton and Commissioner Schmidt for Social Affairs, they're ongoing at the moment, and we expect in the European Skills Week, beginning of November, to have a number of pacts for skills where there is a plan and the money and where everybody agrees to walk the talk. We also need rules to be fit for purpose for this renovation wave. And here we have to look at European rules, but also at national rules. European rules first. We are looking at one piece of legislation that's very relevant to you, which is the Machinery Safety Directive. And we expect to work on that in the first half. The idea is to have an AI component and to to look again at the essential requirements to be sure that this is fit for purpose. And that brings me, that echoes what I said before about the sensors, for example. But then there is also the construction product regulation, which unfortunately is not really fit for purpose. You may experience that every day. So we will also be looking at that to make sure that that works in a better way. And then, yes, we will also be looking at national rules in the context of a single market enforcement task force, which was just created, and which is it's a very powerful setup because it combines member states and the Commission. So rather than the Commission telling the member state and the member state saying, "Oh no, I don't want to change anything," we've put everybody together, and we will be looking at such things as architects, very relevant for the construction, for the renovation wave, because today an architect who knows his thing and who knows maybe about new materials, if he wants to work in another member state, they have to take a new insurance. So if they work in several member states, they have to take, I don't know how many insurances. That's absurd because actually we have harmonized the insurance market. But today there are still 19 member states having these strange rules. So that's what we have to attack to make it better. And then we have to look at planning capacity. There's a lot of money coming down now from the Next Generation Europe instrument. 750 billion in total, but we need to invest it in a good way. And for good investment, I don't have to tell you, you need to plan in a good way. And that's not always the case when we look at different national administrations. So we're helping them to actually plan in a good way this renovation wave and the projects linked to it. And then, of course, money. And there is not only private money, but there is also public money, but they have to come together. You will not be able to finance all by public money. So we need to give investors certainty and security so that they do want to invest. And here I'd like to mention that 30% of the 750 billion that we're spending under the Next Generation EU, we will take up from the market. 30% will be green bonds. That's a challenge. And that's money that requires projects and renovation wave to deliver these projects to make these bonds green. For example, we're also working on taxonomy, which is the globally first gold standard for investors to identify what's sustainable and what's not in terms of investment activities. That's going to be very important. And we see a huge investor appetite also for this type of reassurance where they invest their money. So, ladies and gentlemen, the renovation wave, that's your industrial strategy. We ask you, we hope you will ride this wave. We will support you as best we can with investment, with the right regulatory framework, with the right governance. We are looking at building a governance and platform in the renovation, in the kind of ecosystem, construction ecosystem. And obviously also with our renewed trade toolbox to support. So I hope you'll walk with us, you'll ride with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kerstin, for your comments. Great to have you with us. Deeply, deeply appreciated. Thank you. Next.
Thank you. Bye.
Next on the agenda is we're going to look at an innovative collaboration project between Danfoss and Palfinger. And this next part of the session is really going to be about collaboration and how collaboration and trust can enable that innovation to happen. And to begin that session, we're going to start with a video of what they created together. So it's a great time. Let's roll the video.
Together with Danfoss, we created a connectivity solution for our end customers, which enables them to sit right in front of their screens in the office and connect to their machine to get the data like service intervals, geolocation, or machine data. It's a digitalization solution that really adds value to our customers.
In zweiter Linie geht es um um die Fehlercodes, die ersichtlich sind, und das auch noch dazu live. Das heißt, wir können das recht schnell abklären, die Fehler mit dem Servicepartner, und dass das Ganze eben wirklich zentral erfasst wird.
We had already our own customer interface in place when we started to consider working together with Danfoss on the connectivity solution. Danfoss has been very flexible in that situation, so it was no big issue at all to bring the data from the machine of our customers into our cloud, relying on the secure Danfoss system. The collaboration made sure that their and our digital system blocks work perfectly together.
Well, fantastic video, and now I'm joined remotely with two guests. I'd like to introduce them to you now. We have Sebastian Schinwald, Head of Competence Cluster PMO at Palfinger. Sebastian's been with Palfinger for 6 years, and he's led numerous projects in the R&D environment, from system to module to product development to organizational change projects. He's currently ramping up a global project management office within the product line management organization. Welcome, Sebastian.
Hello, Malcolm.
And sitting beside you is Ivan Tepliakov. Ivan is a business development manager at Danfoss Power Solutions. He's been with Danfoss for 3 years in the IoT implementation and business development areas. Prior to that, he's gained 11 years experience as a professional in the aerospace industry, working in engineering, project management, and program management. Gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have you here on CECE Congress 2020. It's really a fantastic thing that you have created together. And the first question I have is, how long have your companies been partnering together? I think it's been quite a long relationship between the two companies.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm with Palfinger for 6 years, and I heard rumors that it might be longer than 25 years. So
yeah, so for sure, by the time we have started at our respective companies, the partnership had already been firmly in place, and I think that's also one of the exciting things, to come into something that's already evolving, and then to help evolve it even further with some of the new activities that we're doing, and keep expanding the partnership, so to speak.
Yeah, carrying on a great tradition that's already there. I've got some questions for you, but I also just want to remind the audience, I'd love to invite them to, if they have any questions about what we're discussing, about your innovation, about how you collaborated, we'd love to have your questions coming into us. And please send them. They come to me on my iPad and I can read them out later. But Sebastian, I just to start with, can you tell us a little more in more detail about how the Palfinger product works with the Danfoss solution, so we can get a little deeper understanding of what we saw on the video?
For sure. So as Palfinger is a professionalist in lifting solutions, we now integrated the solution that Danfoss provided on the +1 Connect into our systems. So it's not only that we have the loader cranes in place, we also deal with the hook and skip loader and try to bring further products online. And what we do now is to get data out of our system in the usage by using the system of Danfoss, and to implement it into our portal. So we give the data back to our customer that they can improve their daily business.
And you know, I kind of always like to take a step back and look at how things evolved and how things began. And I just want to refer to the presentation that was before us. And did you see the presentation with David Ståhlberg? He was talking about innovation, and he said something which I thought was interesting, which was, innovation happens when competencies come together. And I was wondering if you could tell me, first with Ivan, what competency do you think your company has, and what company, Sebastian, do you think your company has that came together that made innovation possible?
Well, I think the technical competency is of course key, but more importantly is I think we want to stress the partnership aspect of this again, especially as we're talking about digitalization and connectivity. This is a fairly fairly new subject for both of our companies. And I think we are currently building this competency. So aside from us having partnered in what we call fairly traditional industry, we're now together embarking upon building new competencies, which of course is best done with somebody that you can fully rely and trust.
So maybe additionally is there's the one thing to have technical competence in place, but the other thing is like to improve the collaboration competence, which was pretty new to us as well. So when we started with the team, it was like total from scratch. So we didn't collaborate that way before. So Palfinger and Danfoss traditionally worked together in more supplier customer setup, but for this time we really integrated both teams into one team setup, and that's a different competence, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Let's dig into the solution then. It's customer challenges is usually where innovation is born. Where there's a need, a solution will come. So, what challenges are you and your customers facing currently that can be solved by connected solutions like the one you created?
So, looking from a customer point of view, it's really like fleets are getting bigger, so fleets are getting more complex, and so there's one thing to do like a geolocation tracking or data tracking. The other thing is to give the customers some possibility to steer or guide the fleet actually. So maybe as an example given, you have every carrier or every truck already connected with the internet, and you can read out data like service intervals, etc. And actually the crane on a truck is separated from the truck now, and now it's our part to give the customer the opportunity to get this information. So the customer can plan his fleet on service, etc.
Yeah, and I think many of our customers face the same kind of challenges in the sense that they want to implement connectivity. They see let's call them the big guys that are already pioneers in this field, and they're doing a lot of useful things and improving the efficiency of their machines. So our customer base wants to have those same tools and wants to implement connectivity and digital projects. But for them, this is a challenge because they don't know where to start. And at this point, especially we as Danfoss, who cater to a very wide variety of customers in all kinds of industries, be it agriculture, forestry, mining, construction, I think for us it was key to really focus our solution and our development on flexibility, to make sure that we put the tools in the hands of our customers to really do what they need to do, which is of course very different from one customer to the next.
Great. Ivan, just picking up on that, how does this support customer goals during this time of recovery from the crisis? What feedback have you had on this?
Well, generally speaking, we've had very positive feedback. And I think it's important to note, like I said, many of these customers are for the first time embarking upon this connectivity journey. So for us, it's also important to act in a consulting role, to understand the customer needs and to be able to provide solutions based on our customizable platform to support the business goals and the processes that they already have in place. Many of them want to implement connectivity, but implementing connectivity for the sake of just having it rarely leads to success. So you really need to understand how connectivity and how that data can improve what you're already doing.
Mm. And Sebastian, one thing that I'm really curious about is why you chose to implement, or why you chose to develop a product rather than just take one that was already in the marketplace, because it's a much longer path to innovate and develop something yourself.
So that's a very good question. So Palfinger started with having ideas on inventing or engineer to develop our own platform at the very first beginning, so do the hardware stuff and everything. But this, the more we got into this topic, the more we figured out that we do not have the competences we mentioned before. We do not have the competence in place. So after a while, so running the project, we identified, okay, we need to partner up with someone. So we had a look at several companies, like one in Austria, America, whatever. And we also had the opportunity to have a look on commodity parts, which are existing, but they didn't fulfill our needs. And when the first time we met up with Danfoss here in Salzburg, it was pretty exciting because it was like, okay, we know each other, we know what, but both of us were like, okay, that's gonna be a journey. That's not something we get fixed by the end of the day. It takes time. And also by doing so, it was within the project, we came to certain points where we were like, okay, what if we go further? Like bidirectional communication, whatever. And this is where the benefit came from.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the key benefits of having a partner, in that you can skip the getting to know each other phase and get straight to working. And you know that if you have a long-term partner that you're working with, that it's not just a one-way street. It's not a customer-supply relationship. It's someone who's going to listen to you, and you know, listening is going to take place on both sides, and that you're really working together towards a common goal. And at the same time, some of these new industries, many of our customers don't truly know what it is that they're looking for. So it's up to us to put our collective experiences together about what we know about our customers, what you know about your customers, and bring them to the table and start looking at it together and developing a solution that's going to meet everyone's needs.
But also to be very honest, it's not something that goes without friction and tension. So during the project, we had those regular ups and downs, but it also, I think, it make possible to have a solution like this in place. So that's
yeah.
Well, every happy marriage has rainy days as well, as the old saying goes. We actually have a question from coming in from someone named CG, the initial CG. How do you collect machine and sensor data from telematics? What business cases do you cover with the telematics module? Can you give us some insights there on the technical side?
Yeah, again, so this is our platform is built with flexibility in mind. So it's really putting the tools into the hands of the customers. And we have customers that take their first steps in terms of fleet management. So all they might want to know is, where is the machine? Where is it supposed to be? What are the work hours? Is it working? Is it working on a Sunday and it's not supposed to? So these are the kind of simple data that you can collect and evaluate. And it already gives you a lot of insight and automates many of the processes that would have normally been manual. Previously, as a fleet manager, you would have had to call the operator and see if he's where he's supposed to be, if the work is really being done. One of the advantages is, once you have that in place, then you automatically start thinking towards the next step. And this is where we're especially excited about, because customers will start realizing the tremendous potential and thinking of new ways to collect more data and use it to gain productivity, to gain efficiency.
Great.
In our case, it's very specific. So we read, for example, our working hours, failure codes, also our stability control system, where the pistons at. So those are the real pure data behind. But the thing is, one side is to have the data in place. The other thing is like what to do with the data. And so if it comes to predictive whatever, maintenance, etc., that's the future state. But first of all, you need to have this data in place to get somehow the possibility to do calculations on it.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, we have just 20 seconds left, and one thing that Ivan said to me when we were doing testing yesterday was, collaboration between two great companies doubles your chances of succeeding, and I think that you have proved that to be very, very true. Sebastian, Ivan, it's been great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being part of the Congress and showing us how collaboration and trust can really build an innovative solution. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, as we're going to take a break in a minute, you know, what we can see is that we keep seeing themes coming up in the today's session of, you know, technology and innovation being an enabler of us to recover, to move forward. Very exciting presentation so far. But now it's time for us to stretch our legs, have a cup of coffee. We're going to have a 10-minute break. 2.5-minute break. We're going to have a 2.5-minute break. So grab a coffee and then we'll come back with the next sessions. Thank you.